Hey fellow gardeners, Dawn here from Seasonal Designs. I live in Wisconsin, Zone 5, and today we are talking dahlias. It's this time of year I get a lot of questions about my dahlias. I've been sharing them all summer long, and people want to know when is the right time to dig them out, how do you know they're ready, and how do you store them, and oh, by the way, when do you plant them up the following spring? So we're going to touch a little bit on all of that today, but we are going to start with fall right now. Now, if you live in zones 8 and up, you can leave your dahlias in the ground. If you live in zone 7, that's kind of iffy. Chances are they'll be fine unless you get a really cold or very wet winter. But if you live in zone 6 and colder, like I do, I live in zone 5, then we need to dig out our dahlias and we need to store them for the season. How do you know that they're ready? Well, in my climate, they start to get hit with cold, cold nights. We've had nights in the 30s, low 30s. We've had some frost, and you can see by the ones here in front of me that they did get hit with frost, and they have been looking like this for about a week now. So that tells me that they are ready for me to cut down, label, and dig out. So let me show you my process on how I do that. Well, there's a couple of things you're going to need for this process. A sharp snips. I love my Falcos, so we can cut these down, leaving a stalk. You're going to need a way to really tag your tubers if you want to do that, so you know what variety is what, because they all look the same once you dig them out. Believe me, it's hard to tell them apart. And then the next thing you need is something to dig them out. And I highly recommend a pitchfork like this with the heavier duty tines. And this is going to help you easily dig them out without damaging the tuber. You can see this particular dahlia right here has gotten hit with frost. He's been like this again for about a week. I am going to come in and I am going to cut off the tops of this so that I am down to just a short stalk. And I'll give you a close-up of this so that you know what it looks like here. Well, the dahlia I picked here is a little shaded, but I'm pretty sure you can see what that looks like. We're just going to grab our pitchfork, we're going to get in here, and we're going to dig this out. You really want to make sure that you're out far enough that you're not going to damage the tubers. And you're just going to slowly start digging around it and loosening up the soil. Now I have some gladiola bulbs here as well. So those are going to come out too, which is fine. All right, and once you get it loose, you're going to shake as much of the soil off of it as possible. That got big this year. I think I was very happy here in my raised beds. So now once that's out, I'm going to tag this so I know what it is. Now the next thing I do is I like to let these sit out and dry a little bit. Even though it's been dry here, there's still some of the soil that's in here is a little bit wet, and so I really just want to let them dry. I'm going to come in and cut these stalks just a little bit shorter. Sometimes these can hold water in them. So when I store these for the next, I'm just going to leave them sit really for like a day. I'm going to let them sit like upside down. Now, what I just noticed is this tuber is so big. When I dropped it like that, look at this. This is going to come apart. So I don't usually split this. Right away, but since this one is coming apart so easily, I am going to split that right away. So now I will have to label this chunk as well, and then I'm going to store them both upside down here in my wheelbarrow until tomorrow. I'm going to come back and check on them, and then we'll go from there. Let me show you what I found on one of my dahlia tubers. This is a really good example, unfortunately, of gall. Gall is caused by a bacterium that is found in the soil, and it causes this abnormal growth on your dahlia tubers. Now, there are two types of gall. There is crown gall and there is leafy gall. And this can look a little bit different from plant to plant or tuber to tuber, but the most important thing to know is that you are going to just take that infected tuber and you're going to throw the whole thing in the garbage. Well, I want to show you something else. So this is a gladiola bulb. And you see all the, I'm going to call it extra growth on this. These are actually little baby gladiola bulbs. I'm showing you this because I don't want you to think every time you see growth on a bulb or on a plant, it's automatically gall. You got to take a good look at it. So don't fear. These are just new little baby bulbs growing on my gladiola bulbs. Now, I have been growing, digging, and storing dahlias for 4 years. This is my 5th year, and I've not encountered this before. So out of the 12 tubers that I dug out, only 2 had that gall. And they were 2 dahlias that were new to me this year. I ordered them online from a reputable online company. Actually, when they sent them to me, they were supposed to be HS date in this beautiful melon color. Well, they actually were more of like a bright yellow color, which I ended up liking. So I thought, fine, I'll keep them, I'll grow them. Maybe next year I'll try again for the melon color and add it to my collection. But those were the 2 dahlias that had the gall. None of the other dahlias had gall at all. Now, both of these dahlias were kind of growing side by side, so I feel like it is somewhat contained to the one bed that is kind of to my left or behind me right here. The thing about the bacterium, the agrobacterium, is that it could be in my soil, and my soil can give it to other plants, but it could also be on a dahlia tuber that is introduced to my garden. However it happened, or whichever way it happened, you need to know that this bacterium lives in the soil. It can affect other plants through an injury in the plant, either in its stem or its root, and that it stays in your soil for a long time. So knowing that the bacterium, this agrobacterium, can stay in your soil and it can affect other plants, you have to also think about your garden now, and what are you going to do about the soil? Am I just going to simply rotate my dahlias out of there? Because it didn't affect my zinnias at all. It didn't affect any of the other annuals that I had growing in this bed. So do I just rotate them out, put some other annuals in there next year and see what happens? Or do I remove some of that soil where those 2 were planted and then put in fresh, soil, garden soil, and compost for next year? So I haven't made that decision yet, but it is something that I will need to think about. So why am I telling you all this? It's because this is my first experience with gall, and I've learned a lot from it, and I want you to also learn how to recognize it and know what to do should this happen to you if it hasn't already. So if you see gall on a tuber, you're going to take that entire tuber, and just to be safe, you're just going to throw it away in the garbage can, or you're going to burn it. The second thing you need to know is that it can spread to other plants, and it is in your soil. In order for it to infect your plants, your plants have to be damaged in some way, the stem or the root or one of the tubers. And it doesn't leave the soil. So everything I've read about this, that agrobacterium stays in the soil for a long time. I also want to talk about something that's very important, and that is disinfecting your tools. So the pitchfork that I was using, the snips that I was using, and the wheelbarrow that I placed that first tuber in when it broke apart, all of that needed to be disinfected. There's a lot of different things online if you Google how to disinfect your garden tools. I had bleach. I used a bleach solution, washed it in a little bleach and water, scrubbed my tools, then put the bleach in my wheelbarrow and swished that around a little bit, scrubbed it out, and simply rinsed it out. It's just really important to take those steps to mitigate spreading that bacteria. That's what I have left. You can see that these have gotten hit with some frost, and the flowers are, they're done. So these should be perfectly fine for digging out. I use tomato cages to hold my dahlias up. I come in, I cut them off at the base. I just take the whole cage and all of these to the mulch pile. I simply pull them out and toss them on the mulch pile. It actually makes cleanup pretty easy. All of my tubers have been sitting out kind of on their side with the stems pointing down now for the last 24, probably even longer than that, maybe 36 hours. They're in a good stage right now, and I don't want them to get too much drier. A lot of the dirt came off when I picked them up, and I'm shaking them. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to cart this up to the house. I have a tub. I'm going to put them in the tub and get them all into the basement where I can work on them under light, and we're going to work on dividing some of these and then showing you how I store these for winter. Well, welcome to my basement, and really my kind of project seed starting area. This is where I really like to work on a lot of things, including dividing up my dahlia tubers, because I've got a great potting bench at a good height. I've got great light. This is where I have everything that I could possibly need for doing this, and it just is easier for me to do it down here. Now, the one thing I do want to mention about why I split my dahlia tubers. You see a lot of videos online where they're showing you how to split your dahlias down to get maybe 1 or 2 tubers and an eye, which I think is great. But I don't need to have lots and lots of a particular type of dahlia. My goal is to have 2, maybe 3 really nice size, healthy dahlia plants. So I'm not gonna split these down to 1 or 2 tubers. I don't need that many dahlias of the same kind. And if I get to the point where my tubers are getting too big, I could potentially share a couple of my tubers, but my focus is really just to get down to a couple of healthy plants. So I'm going to slide you in here, and we're going to take a look at the next steps. All right, so this is one tuber, and the first thing that I like to do is to get rid of all these little bits that are hanging here because we don't need any of these. So you're really going to just kind of come in with your schnips and you're just going to kind of take all of those off. The other thing that I'll do is if I see any damaged tubers while I'm doing this, I will remove those as well. Like I don't really need this little guy. You can see that he has a little bit of damage like right there. So I'm just going to remove that whole thing. Now once I get it a little bit more cleaned up like this, I see a damaged tuber. So I'm hoping you can see this. Let me show you. So do you see this right here? This actually looks like it could be the mother tuber, or maybe I think it's this one. So I am going to remove that because it's damaged. You really don't want any damaged tubers storing over the winter or anything that might seem a little soft. So for sure that. And I'm just going to carefully try to get in there and just cut that out. I'm not saving that. I'm also going to remove these little guys. They're not going to do much for me. And it looks like I've got just a couple more little things here to clean up. Now, this potentially could split apart. I can tell that this could split, or I could leave it together, but I feel like this one tuber, if you came over here, this probably would split apart. And you just kind of have to work the tubers around gently. Just kind of keep moving them. And they're just kind of mixed into each other here. So I'm probably going to end up, well, let's see. I think this guy's got to come out. And sometimes it does take a little bit of time. There we go. You just have to be patient. So now I have 2 of this particular dahlia. All right, well, that first clump was pretty small and pretty easy, but sometimes you can get some pretty large clumps of tubers that are all sort of massed together. I kind of speeded up the cleaning up process here. I will get rid of all the feeder roots. I will also remove the stalks. And then again, it's a matter of just trying to get in there and separate that big group of tubers. You may have to sacrifice one of the tubers, maybe 2 or 3 of them. Once you kind of get in there and find a space where you can cut, you can make some cuts, and they will start to loosen up and divide. So here you can see I have separated that one big clump, and I've got one there, and then the second piece pretty much falls apart, and I think I divided this down to 4 clumps of tubers. Now the eyes can be somewhat hard to see on film, so I zoomed in, took a couple of pics. This one's pretty obvious of an eye. This one, not so much. But remember, when I'm dividing these, I'm getting these down to maybe 3 or 4 tubers per clump. They've got good necks and they have good eyes, so I should be fine. Our dahlias are cleaned, they're divided, and they're ready for storage. What's next? You want to make sure you store your dahlias in a cool location that is dark, probably a basement or a cellar or even your garage, as long as your garage does not freeze during the winter months. Ideal storage temperatures for dahlias can range from 38 to 50, 54 degrees, and ideal humidity is between 65 and 85% humidity. I store my dahlias here in my basement. It's the coolest place I have. My garage could potentially freeze, and I just don't want to chance them freezing in my garage. Now, as far as what you store your dahlias in, I think that that can vary greatly depending on where you live and where you store your dahlias. Some people will take their tubers and they'll fold them up in newspaper and put them in a Tupperware container. Some people will store their dahlia tubers in animal bedding in a Tupperware container. And some people put them in a paper bag, closing the top and storing them again in some sort of container. What has worked for me for the last 4 years has been storing them in a paper bag. I will label the bag with the dahlias that I put in, and I probably would put 3 or 4 tubers in one bag. I label it, I'll fold it over, and that will go into a Tupperware container. For me, in the humidity that I have in my basement, I feel like that has been a perfect way for me to store my dahlias. I check on them every so often. If I should see that something is looking dehydrated, I might mist the paper bag. If I find something that looks mushy, I could quickly remove that dahlia. But honestly, in the last 4 years that I have been storing this, I have yet to have an issue with a mushy dahlia or even one that has dried out. I feel like my humidity in my basement, quite luckily, is ideal. So I have not had a tuber come out of storage that hasn't grown the following year. All right, for storage, I don't layer a lot in my bag. It's pretty inexpensive storage container. I simply am going to place these in, and they have all been labeled. And if they don't have a tag on them, like this one, I have written on the tuber, it says Breakout on there. So I have Breakout and American Dawn in here. And let me show you what that looks like. And then all I do is I fold this down. I have labeled my bag. Since everything's labeled in there already, you can choose to do this or not. It's just preference. And then this whole thing goes into a Tupperware container. And I use just one of these nice big storage containers, and I'll be placing all of my tubers in here. I usually just put my lid on this container and put this down in the coolest, darkest corner of my basement. Your dahlias have been stored away now for a couple of months. You've checked on them, they look wonderful, and it's spring, and you're wondering when you should start your dahlias. So I'm not really gonna start my dahlias now, but I am gonna touch base on this so that you're ready for it come spring. I start my dahlias the very beginning of April, and last year I actually started them the end of March. I simply put fresh potting mix in a container, and you're going to take your dahlia tuber, you're going to put it in there, fill that up, give it a little bit of water, and then I place it on my grow table without any light. And as soon as I see little sprigs of the dahlia starting to grow, I'm going to give it a little bit of water. I'm going to get it under my grow lights, and I'm just going to let her do her thing. Now, they will grow here in my basement under my grow lights where I do all my seeds starting. And then come mid-April is when I will move these out into the greenhouse, and I will grow them April and May in my greenhouse. So when I plant my dahlias out in my gardens, I have some really nice sized plants that I am putting out in my garden. Well, that is going to be it for my dahlia video today. I hope that you guys found this helpful. If you have any questions, please go ahead and pop those in the comment section. I'll be sure to look for those and try to answer any of those questions. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.